today from the beautiful North Island. It's been a little bit wet this morning, but looks like it's going to clear up and be a beautiful day today. So, what's happening today? We've got the 1st of June. The 1st of June 1918 is the day when John Monash took over command of the Australian Corps. For some people, might think it's a bit of a foregone conclusion that he would be the man to get it, but turns out it wasn't quite that easy. So I'll tell you all about it. Just have a look at this first. Bloody tough life, isn't it? So the formation of the Australia Corps was a major turning point in Australian history, because up until that point there was no such thing as an Australian army. The 5 Australian divisions that fought throughout the First World War were all just individual divisions of the main British Army. So we had a situation where the 1st, 2nd and 3rd divisions formed 1st Anzac Corps, and the 4th and 5th divisions, along with the New Zealand division, formed 2nd Anzac Corps. And each corps was assigned to different British armies. Basically what this meant was that no 2 Australian divisions fought side by side through most of the war. The most common practice was that one Australian division would replace another division in the British-held part of the front, and then that division would then be replaced by another Australian division as they were worn down. However, as the war dragged on, the Australians built a bit of a reputation, a bit of a name for themselves, and there were calls for all the Australian troops to be brought together under one corps, under the command of an Australian officer. And in late 1917, the British command finally relented and the Australian Corps was born, on paper at least. Now, the reorganisation of a military unit on that scale obviously requires a lot of organisation and shuffling of paper, with all sorts of decisions to be made, such as who would be the leader. Things were delayed somewhat when the Germans, rather inconsiderately, launched their spring offensive of 1918, which gave the Allies a bloody good scare. They broke through the British 4th Army, and it was all too possible at this point that they could end up winning the war. Please excuse me if I break into a little bit Aussie pride at this point, but it was our boys who played a large role in averting the disaster and stopping the German advance around Villers-Bretonneux. And that's why there's a school in the little township of Amiens which carries the sign, "Never Forget Australia." But I digress. Where was I? So after the situation had been stabilised, the final bits of the Australian Corps were soon put in place, with the English-born divisional commanders making a way for the Australian divisional commanders. There was still a bit of debate about who was going to be the top dog. If you know anything about the Australian history of World War I, you're probably screaming at your screens now saying, "It's John Monash, who else would it be?" Well, here's where it all goes a little bit soap opera. The choice came down to 2 men, John Monash and Brudnell White. Monash was nominated by Birdwood, who was the English general who has had command of the Australians since Gallipoli in 1915. And he was also the man favoured by General Haig, who was the top dog of the entire British Army. Done deal, you'd say, and it would have been, except for 3 men. Will Dyson was the official war artist for the Australian Army. Charles Bean was the official correspondent and historian, and Keith Murdoch. Will Dyson didn't play much of a role in the coming drama, but he added his voice to that of Bean's to convince Murdoch to join them in a campaign against Monash. What did Bean have against Monash, really? Well, to cut a long story short, Bean had a very idealistic view of the typical Australian soldier. Basically, the Australian soldier was a big, strong country lad, broad shoulders, recklessly brave. And he felt that Brudnell White was just such a man. And it indeed developed something nearing an infatuation for him. Probably in what you would call in modern parlance as a bit of a bromance. Monash, on the other hand, he was a city man. He's a bit older, he's kind of short, not particularly impressive from a physical point of view. He was also of German ancestry, and worst of all, in Bean's mind, he was a Jew. Now, I have the utmost respect for Charles Bean. As a chronicler and a historian, I don't think he has an equal anywhere. But this is one of the few occasions where he blotted his copybook and he was just wrong. The other main player was Keith Murdoch. Nobody's really sure exactly what Keith Murdoch's job was. He was supposed to be a journalist, but it was quite obvious he was in London to be the voice of the Australian Prime Minister, Billy Hughes, in the English political system. He loved a bit of political meddling. And just in case the idea of a Murdoch meddling in politics rings a bell, well, it should, because Keith Murdoch is the father of this clown. And that's the only mention Rupert Murdoch is ever going to get on my channel. So what was I saying about cutting a long story short? So basically Bean and Murdoch did all they could to get White appointed commander. And not always through the most upstanding means, it's got to be said. Hughes was due to arrive in France to visit the troops around this time, to have a bit of a tour and to have a look around and just to support the troops as he liked to do. And Murdoch had filled his head with this notion that there was a huge groundswell of support for White. But upon his arrival, Hughes started to realise that this wasn't the case. He couldn't find anyone who denied that Monash was the best man for the job. Even Brundle White said Monash was the man. So eventually, obviously, Monash was appointed and he took command on 1st of June 1918. As a postscript to all this drama, Bean did eventually say that he was wrong, both in getting involved in the decision-making process and also for not recognising that Monash was indeed the best candidate. So I can still hold Charles in high esteem. Keith Murdoch, on the other hand, yeah, we're still waiting. Anyway, so obviously Monash proved his worth at the future battles of Hamel and Amiens, but I think I've dragged this one out as much as I dare. So we'll cross those ones at another time. So there we go, 1st of June 1918, what will be the beginnings of a unique Australian army was born, with John Monash taking command of the Australian Corps. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to be advised when new episodes are posted, just click on the subscribe button that's down there somewhere. If you want to find out what I'm up to, go to my website at warwickoneil.com. If you want to check out my blog site, it's notyouraverageIdiot.net, where I blog on all sorts of things from four-wheel driving, single parenting, whatever comes into my head. So hope to hear from you soon, and cheers. See ya.